everybody. How's it going? This is Paul from Cents Per Mile. It's another episode of Out of Hours, where we kind of expand on something that we had talked about in the previous episode. And this week, we had talked about orientation. So we brought Tim Norlin on, and we have Charles over here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through, collectively, we have like 43 years of recruiting experience, and we're going to tell the biggest fails that we've ever seen from drivers that got knocked out of orientation.
Yeah, just to be clear, you said we have how many years of recruiting experience?
43.
And 30 of that comes from Tim.
It's true.
Gee, thanks.
So, all right, Tim. Well, you are the most experienced, so we'll let you go first. What's your most ridiculous orientation story?
Oh, geez. Fortunately, it wasn't where I'm at now at Roehl. It was with another carrier, but we had a driver in orientation one Monday morning, and this carrier was really great. We put out, being in Wisconsin, we would put out big platters of cheese and sausage and cookies for the drivers so they could snack and munch, and kind of a nice welcoming way to start orientation. But this particular driver was in the back of the classroom and had pulled the hoodie up over her head and laid her arms down on the table and proceeded to fall asleep. So the orientation instructor went and tapped her on the shoulder and said, "Hey, you need to wake up. This is orientation. We need you to pay attention. We're going through paperwork and stuff." And she adjusted and sat up for a while. Well, this went on 3 more times. And the orientation instructor came and got me and said, "What do I do?" And I said, I don't know her situation. We looked, travel, got in plenty early the day before. So, if it was going to be a late bus ride or airplane flight, we would adjust it accordingly. But this person got in like at 6 p.m. the night before. Should have had a good night's sleep. Well, it happened one final time, and I said, "That's it. Bring her into my office." And I brought her in, sat her down, and introduced myself to her. And I said, "Listen, this is orientation is for you to learn about the company, but it's also for us to learn about you as a driver. Just consider this a 4-day interview." And I said, "You're not doing so good right now. You keep falling asleep. You've been wakened up, 4 or 5 times from our orientation instructor." I said, I don't think this is going to work out for you. And we're going to send you on your way." She didn't like that answer. She sat there quietly for a while, and she decided that she wanted to rearrange my desk. So the first thing she did was rearrange my desk and basically cleared my computer and everything on my desk off onto the floor, jumped up, had a few choice words for me, and then proceeded to walk back to the orientation classroom. Walked into the class, disrupted the class, and then proceeded to take the meat and cheese tray and cookies that we had laid out for all the drivers and threw them across the room. So nobody got cheese and sausage that day. But she did get a trip to the local county jail for the damage to property, destroyed my computer, etc. And we didn't take too highly to that. The funny thing was, I got a call later that day from her mother apologizing for her behavior and wanting to know if we would give her one more chance. And I was polite, but sorry, I don't know what she's doing now. But she definitely didn't go to work for that carrier that day.
That's crazy. So much like yourself, a lot of early stages when you're getting into recruiting, especially the executive side, at some point you touch orientation. So I had a role where I was running the orientation as well as the recruiting department. And if people didn't make it through orientation, they got sent to me to get transportation back home. So I was in one of those stages where we were getting someone transportation back home. And for some reason in my office, we didn't have a printer. I had to walk across the hall to get the printed ticket. So I walked across the hall, got this person their bus ticket because they lived maybe an hour away, turned around, walked back in my office, handed it to them. Everything was great. Like, this person even left us a review on the way out the door, which was cool. So I thought, about 2 hours later, it was lunchtime. and I couldn't find my keys anywhere. And I used to sit them right there at my desk. Could not find my keys. I go looking all over the place, could not find them. Towards the end of the day, the driver actually shows up in their car, and they're doing donuts in the parking lot. And as I walk up to go get the keys, they just pull forward like a bad cartoon show where they just get close and they drive and just make me. I'm like, I'm not chasing this thing. So the local PD had to come get my keys back because the driver was just not going to give the keys back.
Oh
man. Yeah. So my probably worst one. It takes a little bit more of a inappropriate turn, I think. Yeah. So I had this guy. He seemed like a solid driver. Solid history. Well, technically, on paper. And so got him. He didn't actually make it to orientation, but he was all set up. We'd already paid for his travel and everything. And then his report came back. And turns out that he was a registered sex offender. And so I had to call him and be like, hey, man, that kind of limits. We don't know exactly where you're going to end up delivering. Like, that puts restrictions on things. I don't know if that's something you could work with, because I wasn't allowed to be like, oh, there's a good chance that you might be a terrible person. But then he got really quiet. And then he got really mad. I could hear him actually get mad and start breathing heavier on the phone. And he said, you know what? Sure, she was 13 and I was 27. But you know what? We were in love and we're still together. And if that's not okay with you, well, I don't need to work there anyway. And I'm just like, that's cool that you're still together, but apparently your dad or somebody got mad. And you can't go near a playground or a school. So sorry, man.
I mean, I've seen all kinds of stuff doing this for a long time. I mean, it's almost like that one time where the driver gave the hooker in the hotel the rental car and then wondered why we wouldn't give him another one. He said it was a nice lady and sent her on a food run and she didn't come back, but I think there was more to the story than what we got.
What else? What's another one you got, Tim?
Oh, boy.
Going in the bag of tricks.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was actually after orientation, happened after. So orientation completed, drivers were assigned their trucks at the end of the day, and typically orientation went long, so we would let the drivers get settled in their trucks at night and then head on out the next morning with their first load. I happened to be out that evening with my wife and daughter. We went out to eat, and as we're driving back home, we drove by a liquor store, and there was a bobtail tractor in there, and I got the unit number and found out it had just been assigned to one of our new hire drivers, and he was doing a little shopping, and of course our safety team was waiting for him when he got back to the terminal. And, he had stocked his truck. He was ready to go running and
party.
Can't do that. It's a shame. We spent, I think it was a 3-day orientation, and we spent 3 days with this driver, getting them all qualified, set up. Driver was excited, and then to go and do something like that. That was not only a job killer, that was probably a career killer, because I know we notated that and shared that, company policy violation with other carriers that would have called.
We actually swapped to a new hotel one time because it was nicer and it had like a restaurant in it where the drivers could actually go eat. And the food wasn't terrible, but they did have a bar. And within like the first 2 weeks, like we had like a couple different drivers show up still hammered to orientation. So like we had to, we were like, you guys weren't supposed to drink, and so we actually had to like get the hotel the orientation list every week and be like, these people are not allowed to drink.
Yeah.
Hey Charles, tell the pea microwave story.
All right. So I worked at a carrier in a not so great neighborhood in south side of Chicago, Markham, Illinois. And we had a driver come to orientation, and orientation was right next to the ops break room. And so this driver had purchased urine in Markham, Illinois, which anything that, if you know the area, anything that you buy is hotter than anything you had. And then decided to microwave it in the ops microwave to get it up to temperature.
Oh boy.
But there was a camera in that break room, and by the time someone realized what had happened, people were already down there microwaving their ramen for lunch, and they were very upset. That ops department was angry. Like, can you imagine walking into the lunchroom and I'm like, "Hey, stop eating!" There was urine in that microwave.
Yeah, it's like we had a guy once who made it to orientation and then failed his drug test, right? Which is whatever. It happens, and then it was for marijuana. But then time had passed, and somehow he had managed to re-put in his application, but change stuff just enough that it still took. And then he managed to get back into orientation somehow. And then he stepped foot in there, and we just looked at him. We're like, "Oh, wait, what?" And it was kind of a double take. We're like, you've been here before, and you failed to drive. He's like, "Yeah, but you can't blame a guy for trying, right?"
We can deal, and I tell drivers this, and our recruiters tell drivers this, we can deal with anything on the front end. You tell us about it, we'll work through it. We'll see if we can do something with you and help you out, kind of like your person on the sex registry. If we know, maybe we can work through it, but you keep it from us and we find out after the fact or find out while you're already in orientation, it's a totally different outcome, and it's not good for the driver. So that's my advice to every driver. Just tell us the truth. We can work with the truth all day long.
I think it also depends on what it is that pops up. So, like, one time I had a guy, he was in orientation, and we got his criminal report back. Obviously we asked, "Hey, do you have any criminal, history, anything like that?" Not that it matters, and you can't, discriminate against felons and stuff. But, like, this guy came into orientation, and we got his stuff back, and turns out that he had murder charges. And we got some of the summary, it was like, "You shot at your neighbor?" And the guy was like, "Well, yeah, but I didn't kill him." And I was like, "What?"
So you're a crappy shot.
Well, we went back and forth, and like he was just like, "I didn't murder him." I'm like, "But you got arrested for murder." He was like, "Yeah, I shot at him, and there was a mom and daughter walking down the street at the time, and I missed, and I hit the mom." And I was like, "Dude, so you
my gosh."
You got some dark stories there, Paul.
Dude, it was a time, man. There's some crazy stuff that happens.
Yeah. Well, recruiting, again, it's crazy, and I can't stress enough how important it is to come on the forefront and have those conversations like Tim said. It's one of those things that we always encourage. I use the line a lot of times with the drivers where I'm like, "Treat me like your divorce lawyer. I want to know where all the bodies are buried. I have nothing but motivation to help you through this, but I can't help you if you don't tell me where the bodies are buried. I need to know where not to step."
If you don't disclose something and we find out about it while you're in orientation, we're probably going to dismiss you for falsification. Don't get mad at us. We're not the ones that lied. We're not the ones that withheld information. I had this was many years ago. This is shortly after I got into recruiting. We had a driver in orientation, and we got a criminal report back that he had listed that he had no criminal record, and it was a pretty lengthy criminal record. A lot of assault and disorderly conduct charges, right? So I pulled the driver out of orientation, took him into a conference room, sat him down. Unfortunately, I was on one side of the table, he was on the other, and I'd let him know that this came back, wanted to see, does this sound right? Is this you? "Yeah, but that shouldn't matter." I said, "Well, it's recent. This was an assault. What happened?" "Well, a guy was hitting on my woman. I pulled a knife on him." It's like, "Oh boy. Okay, well, we're not going to be able to move forward with you." Guess what he did? He pulled a knife out and started chasing me around the conference room. Fortunately, it was a big conference table, and I was able to stay 3 steps ahead of him. But that was scary. And fortunately, we thought we might have an issue with the person because of the criminal history. So law enforcement was there pretty quickly and subdued him. But it was 2 minutes of hell for me, trying to stay one step ahead of the guy. Fortunately, I weighed a lot less and moved a lot faster back then. So.
Yeah, it's like we had a team once, and in orientation, they were a team, and they were a married couple who was separating, so they had came to start their solo careers. But I guess, like we kind of took that it was amicable because they were both coming to the same place, not a big deal. And it ended up turning into a standoff in the parking lot for like 2 hours, and the cops had to show up because they were about to kill each other.
I mean, because I drove, and, Paul, you've heard this story, but one of the first negative experiences I had in Chicago was when I went to a carrier who later on I wound up working in the office for, but I went to orientation, the door locked from the outside of the room. Like, we talk about the driver fails all the time, but I'm not crapping you here, Tim. I walked in, they showed me, it was like a larger, like, closet. It was nicely painted, no windows, and they had tables lined up, and they shut the door, and you couldn't get out.
Was it just you?
Yeah, it was just me.
So it was like solitary confinement. So orientation really is like prison.
Captive audience.
Yeah, you couldn't go nowhere. So I'm like beating on the door after about an hour goes by. Nobody walks into this place. Hour goes by, I'm beating on the door. I'm like, guys, I'm sitting in this closet. Like, I'm out of here. Oh, no, someone will come. Someone came. And it was like that Pisper video where everything that could possibly be a cliche in trucking happened. The door locked from the outside. I got promised a new truck. I get this truck with the mirrors taped on with electrical tape. And they're like, it's new to you. And those were the words that came out of this guy's mouth.
Oh, man.
I mean, so the point is you got fails on the driver's side. And I think it's a failure to set proper expectations or understanding this is a job, because so much time has gone by where it was everyone trying to get as many drivers in the door as possible that drivers forgot that this is still a job. And then you have fails on the carrier side, and they both had their place to learn from. But I think it comes down to a foundation of expectations and communication. You have to have these conversations. You're going to work for this person. If you're a driver, you have to trust them to help you make your living. So you should have these conversations on the front end. And if you're a carrier looking for drivers that are going to determine your profitability, you should want to set a good standard and put your best foot forward.
And orientation should be welcoming. It should be informational. It should be engaging. Everyone should be friendly to you. That should tell a driver something right away. Do they welcome you? Are they friendly, etc. You've heard the stories about the drivers go to orientation, and instead of being welcoming, it's a safety person up there telling them the 101 ways they're going to get fired. That's not a good orientation experience. Don't do this, don't do that. Yeah, you can't do that. I mean, you have to include safety, and a lot of our orientation is spent on safety and our expectations. But it's not about here's the 101 ways you're going to get fired.
Have you ever seen the other extreme? So I do undercover orientation, like an undercover driver service to audit orientations. And I went to this one time where they were so pro-driver that they forgot that they're still hiring. So I get to this orientation, and I mean, it was by far one of the best orientation experiences from a driver's perspective. But then comes in ops. And here's the ops manager. Okay, where don't you want to run? How many miles do you want to run? What type of time of day do you want to run? Is there anywhere you don't want to go? Is there anywhere you prefer to go? And I'm like, oh, are you planning my vacation? I'd love to go to Bermuda. And so I'm writing up the evaluation at the end of it, and I had to it was the most awkward conversation to say, you did such a good job of making this driver centric that you forgot that it's still a job. There was no expectation. As a driver, I had no expectation other than you were here to make me happy.
Yeah, well, I mean, but there's also something to be said about, the opposite end. Yeah, it's safety, but also we talk about how it's, the company's or the driver's job to put their best foot forward. But at the same time, it is the driver's chance to put their best foot forward. It's almost like an extended job interview, which shouldn't be 3 days. But either way, at the same time, it's the company's chance too. So if they get you there, it's like the cheapest way possible, and it's absolutely terrible, and they put you in a hotel with another person where you're afraid you're going to get bed bugs, or it turns out you're in an RV on the hill, or you're in a basement with a bunch of cots and 8 other dudes, and then you just get bad pizza every day. Not even good pizza, just bad pizza. What are you going to do for me when I'm on the road if you're skimping on orientation?
Well, and I think a lot of carriers have taken that approach where they're trying to make it a positive experience, but they're also trying to check all the boxes of the information they have to provide. And like, let's be frank, some of this information these drivers have heard 20 to 30 times in their career. So there's no good way to make it fun. You just have to get it done. But at the same point, you got carriers that are trying to do this the right way, trying to make it a positive experience. And then you have the drivers that have been so callous to the process that they no longer treat it with the respect it deserves. So it's kind of like this fire that's being fed from one side or other, whether it's the driver or the carrier. Someone's constantly feeding it and it keeps growing, but no one's actually doing anything together to put it out. And I think it, again, starts with that proper expectation. The recruiters need to set the expectation that orientation is professional. You need to bring your stuff. You need to be ready to work. You need to say the stuff that's pertinent to that process. You can take all the other time to BS afterwards, but during orientation, just do what you need to do. Don't go monkey off at the strip club. Don't go hang out at the bar. Don't show up late. Use your alarm clock. Bring shoes. I know it's crazy, but bring shoes.
I once had a driver who actually came to orientation and did not bring any closed-toed shoes with them at all.
Yeah, that's like a common one for recruiting. We've all seen that one. So if you had to, with all this experience, and we talked about all the things that can go wrong and all the things that could go right, if you had to give one piece of advice to today's drivers on how to have a successful orientation experience, what would it be, Tim?
Am I limited to just one?
No, you can give more.
Okay. All right. Here's what I would say. If you're not going to make it, call your recruiter and let them know, I'm not going to make it, so your carrier can cancel your bus ticket, your airplane ticket, your rental car, whatever. But if you do show up, which is what we want, be on time. Follow the instructions that were given to you by the recruiter. Be on time. You're a truck driver. You're expected to deliver freight on time. So show up to orientation on time. And then pay attention to orientation. Yes, you've been through it. It's a necessary evil. We get it. But every company has different policies and procedures. And you might think you know it all, but you might actually learn something too. So please pay attention. And we put everything in writing, so our drivers have it. The offer letter, everything is in writing. A lot of carriers I know don't do that, but make sure that we're meeting your expectations too. Is what we told you, what our recruiter told you and put on paper, what you were told in orientation? Hopefully the answer is yes, but that's a big watch out too, depending on where you're going, what carrier you're going to. Make sure that what the recruiter told you and what you're learning in orientation match up.
And Paul, in your experience, what advice would you give today's drivers?
Well, I think Tim covered most of it. I think number one is just know what you want. And like Tim said, stick to that. This is the one chance you have to figure out what you like, if this company is going to work for you long term. Two, know how to do the job. I did once have to disqualify a driver in orientation because they took literally, we counted 76 times to back into a spot during their driving test. So just know how to do the job.
Be a professional at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just, that's it. Just be solid and hold the company accountable that they're solid too. And you know what? If you don't like it, there's no shame in leaving.
Awesome. And I'm going to end it out with be a professional. One of the biggest complaints that today's drivers talk about is the lack of being treated like a professional. But part of being a professional is acting like one. So if you want to be treated like one, let's put our best foot forward as drivers and be professional.
All right, cool. Well, that I think about wraps it up, guys. It's been amazing talking with you, Tim. So if you want to tell anybody about what you're up to, what are you up to, Tim? Where do you work? What are you looking for?
Hey, Roehl Transport, Roehl, is a lot of people pronounce it roll, but freight is finally starting to pick up. We've opened up our hiring areas again. It's been a long time coming. We really grew in 21, 22, and early 23 with a lot of our regional home weekly freight. That hasn't quite come back yet, but we've got. If you want to stay out 11 to 14 days, we got some great runs right now, and we got drivers that are doing actually better than they have been, which is that's a good sign of things to come. So, gosh, love to talk to drivers. Give me a call.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for coming on Cents Per Mile and Out of Hours. And until next time, I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
And I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson. See you next time.